Hello and welcome to Starting Up. This week we come to you from the Palladium here in Mumbai. On the show today, an exclusive chat with one of Europe's most prolific venture capitalists, Thomas Ho. All the learnings from the European ecosystem and a lot more exciting stuff coming your way in the next half hour. On the show today, love it or hate it, you just can't ignore it. The big social media opportunity and startups are logging on. An interview with Thomas Ho, the co-founder of UK's Netflix LoveFilm.com. And finally, we meet with one of the youngest incubators in the country, the Hatch Incubator. Now, the average number of tweets per day, over 150 million. The average number of photos that are uploaded to Facebook daily, well, 250 million. Bring the two together and one thing's for sure, you've got the user's attention within the social media world. No wonder then that brands are sitting up and taking notice, and a bunch of startups are even servicing this market. Rishang Chandavarkar tracks the trend for us.
Well, if you're on Facebook, there are a number of ads across your screen, some trying to sell you shoes, or cars, or even cute puppies. Clearly indicating that the corporates of the world want to keep in touch with you and the nearly 800 million users on Facebook alone. But just because we like the brand campaign, do we want to keep in touch with the company? Do we want to buy the brand? Or do we just want to be left alone chatting with our friends? Well, the answer to all these questions are being given by a number of startups who are telling marketers how their brand campaigns are doing on social networks. Let's take a look at how this really works. One step most corporates use is benchmarking, often the first step in the process. It's a step Chennai-based Unmetric has made it its core business. They license out a web application which is based on an algorithm that compares brand campaigns on social media platforms with other brands against parameters of engagement like posts and tweets versus geographies. In doing so, a customer can analyze his brand campaign which is benchmarked against a rival brand, and so the user engagement in a campaign can be measured effectively, rather than by just cheering about a large user fan base.
Best practices that the application algorithmically curates are across the sector from across geographies. So if you're a bank in North America, Unmetric might come back to you and say, hey, there's this amazing bank in Australia that's doing some rocking stuff on Facebook, and maybe you want to take a look, because maybe it's relevant for your bank, and you could replicate some of that magic if you chose to.
Unmetric is an Analyze Yourself application in which benchmarking data of more than 3,000 brands worldwide is provided further on, and so an annual subscription model is used. The most basic model costs around $20,000 per year, and the most expensive package can cost around $60,000 per year with the most premium features. While benchmarking is extremely unique, remodeling customer relationship management or CRM for social media is Mumbai-based LocoBuzz, which is also an application created to analyze and more specifically locate incoming tweets and Facebook posts from their exact location.
So for example, being able to look at a macro level, that is a city level, where the buzz is coming from, and then digging down to individual tweets or bits of information is something which we have achieved, which is fairly unique. Secondly, we have integrated a very rich CRM into the system. So not only are we doing analytics, but we are also helping brands manage this buzz by interlinking various social media channels. So you would know a person A on Twitter, what he's saying about you, your competition, what he's talking on Facebook, on email, things like that.
By bringing in the location aspect, marketers can now address consumer grievances and what they like, giving LocoBuzz a major advantage. LocoBuzz's pricing model is simple. They license out their software to clients for either 6 months or a full year and charge on a monthly basis 25,000 rupees for the most basic and 1 lakh rupees for the most premium version. What's important to note is that there are almost no barriers to entry in this space, and so one way to scale and hold market share is to tie up with consulting firms. Vishal, realizing this, has already begun talks with TNS Global and AC Nielsen for a tie-up.
I think there is the mindset is, they are good with understanding this data and interpreting it rightly for their client. What we are good with is accumulating this data and presenting it in a form which saves a lot of time for them.
One of the most established players in this space is SocialWavelength.com, a company started by Sanjay Mehta in 2009. In the last 3 years, Sanjay has been able to put together almost every element of monitoring and CRM together. But realizing that social media is still low priority for most corporates, Sanjay has adopted a services model, often customizing his services to the needs of the corporate.
We participate on various social media platforms on behalf of the brand, either in terms of simple conversations which can happen on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, blogs, whatever, or in between in the course of our engagement if anything specific needs to be done, such as perhaps building some Facebook applications or doing some media buys on Facebook or YouTube or things like that for the client. Those are of course charged extra based on a case to case.
Yet Social Wavelength still plays old school in the sense that they put in man-hours into analytics, unlike Locobuzz and Unmetric who use web applications. And hence in many ways their approach can best be described as social media outsourced. One big problem is that social media is rapidly evolving, and so the parameters of success or benchmarks are extremely blurred, especially to an old school player like Maruti Suzuki. Their Maruti Ritz page has already garnered 1 million users, but for large corporates like them, how much of this success has really translated into sales is still a big question mark.
You cannot have a direct correlation, I'm afraid, because direct correlation between sales and social media presence is probably difficult to gauge, because it's not the only thing which affects sales. So from the point of being aware, from awareness to consideration to mind share to market share, which is actually sales, we are looking at consideration figures and we measure them for each of our brands.
Taking the example of Maruti and most other brands in this space, it's clear that the real effectiveness of social media is in furthering brand value by customer engagement rather than calculating ROI. What creates more ambiguity is that professional talent within organizations is still coming to terms with this new beast called social media, and hence the sector is extremely challenging. A way out has been suggested by EBS Worldwide, a veteran in the digital marketing space, who believes that unless and until social media analytic companies integrate themselves with a client's entire market chain, they themselves will not be taken seriously.
You have to move up the value chain. You have to either partner or work with companies who manage the larger campaign, so that you are easily integrated, and B, you can get good pricing. The more verticalized your service offering is, the more easier it is for a client to really beat you down on price.
In short, if social media analysis companies want to be more relevant, they will have to be able to widen their addressable market. A few studies show that there are close to 2.4 billion social networking accounts registered and are expected to grow to about 4 billion by 2015. So there is no denying that there is a sea of opportunity to explore. But it's the conversion rate from engagement to sale that is key for most clients. And that's something startups in this space are no doubt spending sleepless nights on.
And with other social media platforms like Pinterest seeing a fair amount of traction, you can be sure that this is a space that's going to see a lot of activity in the next few months. We'll of course have our eyes peeled. But for now, let's take a break here on the show. But coming up, an interview with one of the UK's most prolific venture capitalists, Thomas Ho. That's after the break. You've joined us on Starting Up. Now, he's a Norwegian film director and producer, but also an investor in Europe's most creative business. Thomas Ho was in India recently, and Sudhir Sial caught up with him. It's over to Sudhir then in our studios.
Filmmaker, entrepreneur and investor, Thomas Ho wears multiple hats. He's most well known as the co-founder of Love Film, UK's Netflix, which sold to Amazon for over £170 million. Apart from this, he's also the founder of venture capital firm Arts Alliance, which has 13 startups in its portfolio with over 18 exits to its credit. He was in India for the Founders Forum, and we started the interview by asking him to take us through the Love Film journey.
Well, Love Film was indeed a sort of a passion project. I had been an investor in Netflix and a big admirer of what they had done. And I thought, well, Europe needs to do something like it, but not necessarily just like it. So it's sort of the tick-the-box conversation that I know is prevalent around here. We have the same syndrome in Europe. where a lot of people say, okay, let's just do what the Americans have done and we will be fine. I never subscribed to that approach. For me, the opportunity was to harness the passion for film and to be rather centric around film as opposed to the internet aspect of it.
Okay.
And it was an interesting situation because there was a couple of other people who started competing outfits, and they didn't have the same passion among their own customers. So their acquisition costs were much higher. It was harder for them to compete with us. We eventually merged with them, and then we merged with Amazon, where they took a stake in the company and they moved all of their customers into Love Film.
So Thomas, there were 2 points of inflection in that whole journey, right? The first point you alluded to was when Amazon realized that, hey, they couldn't scale their business, their DVD rental business, and hey, we might as well give it to these folks who are executing it well, Love Film, right? And then finally, when you guys were acquired eventually by Amazon itself, right? So it's sort of life sort of came a full circle. So how did that conversation take place? Because it was hardly 2 years after the initial acquisition by you.
Well, I think they liked what they saw.
Okay.
And they said, well, this is really working. It's profitable, it's growing. We want the whole thing.
Right.
Also, there were a few other suitors, and they were not particularly keen on someone else taking it over.
Sure.
And I also thought that when they saw that the traction in the digital side was really started to happen, the streaming business, I think that's when they realized that this is something they were better suited at scaling than just the DVD rental business.
Okay.
So I think to some extent they were sort of waiting for that trigger point to be comfortable with that this was a long-term play.
Right. Thomas, how do you view that industry now? You've been within the DVD rental industry and now the streaming industry for a while. That industry has seen a big shift, right? So it's shifted out of DVD rental to streaming, and there's been an Indian company which hasn't been able to scale in the DVD rental space, 70mm, right?
Yes.
And they've all had inherent challenges in scaling a DVD rental business. How do you view this transition taking place from DVD rental to online streaming? And is the DVD rental business on its own dead?
Oh, it's a very good question. First of all, the DVD rental business is not dead, and it's a great business because it's really hard to do. If you can do it right, it's a great business, and also has a much wider catalog than the streaming business. The streaming business has some inherent challenges. First of all, it has to do with rights. There are limited rights available, and a lot of rights have not been defined because the films predates the definition of digital rights. And then going back and negotiating sync rights with the widow of the composer of film X is really tiring and costly. So for the depth of catalog, DVD and Blu-ray is still a viable format.
Biggest challenge you would say in the DVD rental space is actually logistics and getting the DVD back from the consumer and taking it back to him?
Yeah, and also the operations at the sort of the center. So to get the efficiencies of moving things around and having as small as inventory as possible, at still giving the customer a great service.
Great. Thomas, the final sale to Amazon happened at about 180 million pounds. Did you feel that was the right price? What were your thoughts while that exit was happening? Why do you think it was the right time to exit at that point?
Well, precisely because I think it was a game for the really big boys. The company needed to up its ambitions, or not at all. So we were planning either we were going to go public and raise lots of money, or we needed to, in essence, partner with one of the big businesses. It was no opportunity to be we were turning over north of 100 million pounds. We were profitable. But
why not go public then?
Well, the market wasn't great. Second of all, we had a great suitor who wanted the company, and at a reasonable price. I think it was about the right price, primarily because it felt good at the time when we did it, but at the same time, a few weeks later, I must say I was sort of in remorse. Because I felt that, wow, they're sort of taking my little, my brainchild away.
Thomas, what are you seeing in Europe right now? What are some of the sectors that have been gaining traction. You mentioned doom and gloom, and there's this situation playing out with Greece and with the EU. What sort of sectors are you seeing that are still exciting and interesting in Europe?
Well, I think there are two things that excites me in Europe. They're the kinds of plays where you're looking at technology to, in essence, transform traditional businesses. So where you've got a combination of physical business and digital business that also makes them, to some extent, immune from attack from overseas. There's a big trend in that, and the sort of retail combos, which I think is quite interesting. And then I see a lot of smart things around social marketing, figuring out how to harness things like Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and other networks of in essence starting with the consumer rather than with the products, and figuring out how to match the consumer demand and looking at group buying and other things in more interesting ways than the obvious sort of Groupon type of knockoffs, which I don't think are particularly interesting.
Coming to India, you've been here now for a while. Yeah. You've been at Founders Forum. You've met a number of entrepreneurs and interesting startups. How would you view the Indian landscape, and what are some of the companies that have caught your fancy?
Well, first of all, it's humbling to meet so many talented people. Founders Forum is very good at bringing together some great entrepreneurs. So a few companies that I met that I thought was particularly exciting. I thought Quicker was one that caught my eye. I think the Infinibeam is an interesting company. I think their way of thinking about the infrastructure that's required for e-commerce looks very, very sensible. But the one I thought was most sort of interesting and unique and very different from what I would have seen in Europe was the Chutu.in company. I thought that was really quite the story that the guys told about how they started off selling fruit on the roadside and then kind of ended up having this network was really quite amazing.
It's been a pleasure having you on the show, Thomas. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And by virtue of being a member of the Founders Forum, Thomas is very keen to make angel investments here in India. We'll of course be following up on his work. Let's take a break here on the show, but coming up. They help give birth and shape to companies. The Hatch Incubator on Capital Ideas after the break.
Why not go with the best? Yes Bank now offers 7% per annum interest rate on savings accounts. Say yes to growth with Yes Bank.
Taking India to the world. Let's go. Hey! Dad! क्यों किया? समझो. जिंदगी के खेल में भी जीतने के लिए आपके लाडले को चाहिए आपकी समझ और एक भरोसेमंद साथी. LIC Children's Plans. जिंदगी भर जीत का वादा.
Okay, I'm really disappointed. I've seen the Pepsodent Dishum film.
कैंडी खाते हो, चॉकलेट खाते हो, ये खाते हो, वो खाते हो, सड़ जाएंगे, दांत सड़ जाएंगे.
All in all, I think it doesn't work.
Really, what doesn't work in the film?
I think the message comes through. I don't like the acting. Nothing works in the film.
But I'm willing to bet on this one. Just put it on evidence. If this doesn't work, then you're going to tell them to us, get the share of the business. Therefore, before they do all that, if this doesn't work, I'll get out of the advertisement business. That's the deal.
Dishum तो Pepsodent का काम है ना?
Okay, if it doesn't work,
नहीं यार.
you know what to do. But if it does work, I'll buy you a bottle of champagne.
Brought to you by Tourism Australia. Eyeball, your eyeball view, our technology new. Expedia, world's largest online travel company.
joined us on Starting Up. Now, it's when startups are born that they need the maximum nurturing and mentoring, and that's where incubators play a rather critical role. One such example of a recently founded one is the Hatch Incubator. Surbhi Goyal caught up with them in Delhi.
Do you fancy your favorite Hannah Montana's backpack? Or wish to grab the Benton character goodies bag for your 4-year-old? Find all these and more school stuff at AllSchoolStuff.com, an online store that sells school supplies. Helping kids don these exciting branded school products is AllSchoolStuff.com that started drawing the successful story in late 2011. A journey which began with funding and incubation from the Hatch Incubator in 2011. A small amount of funding that in this case helped Manoj and his team hatch their plans.
Hatch has helped us secure our first round of funding, and they believed in our model. They've helped us not only in funding, getting us good mentors who are helping us mold and grow the company. So they've been invaluable in our initial stage.
After spending 15 years in Silicon Valley, Puneet Vatsan, the founder of the Hatch Incubator, decided to root back to India to impact the early stage startup ecosystem and meet the need. And he identified certain unmet needs that most startups in India continue to have.
Early stage entrepreneurs require significant handholding, significant mentorship, a significant emotional go-to, and they have significant questions. Capital is not the only issue for an early stage entrepreneur.
Started 3 months back, Hatch already incubates 7 startups that vary from online education to solar power energy to social music discovery platform to environment training.
While AllSchoolStuff approached the Hatch Incubation Center to get their first round of investment, on the other hand, Mera Gaupar joined hands with the Hatch to get mentorship, scalability and use their resources. Mera Gaupar, that provides lighting and mobile phone charging services in villages, plans to reach out to 1 million people in the next 3 years with the help of Puneet and his team at the Hatch Incubation Center.
Nikhil Jaisinghani began his journey in 2010 when he came back to India from the US and started Mera Gaupar to provide solar-powered microgrids in Indian villages. While he had access to capital, it was the right guidance that Hatch Incubation Center gave that helped him execute his plan.
The Hatch is helping us do is take a look at those other things. So the great thing is we have that money, so they don't have to focus their efforts on raising money for us or helping us raise money, but they can look at how we're spending that money. And so that's really helpful for us to take a body of entrepreneurs who have a lot of experience and merging that with what we've put together thus far. We're not experienced entrepreneurs. This is our first time in that entrepreneur space, so it's really helpful to have the experience and advice and guidance from those who have a lot a better track record in the space.
Typically investing 10 lakh rupees in a startup for 2% equity, Hatch Fund invests at an early stage in high potential startups or startup idea. And some of the most important factors that lead to an investment are
that do the team members have the willingness to learn, the hunger to succeed, a very large vision. Granted, the steps may be very small, but they should have a very large vision. They should be mentorable. Their business plan will change as they go along, as they discover markets, and they have to be able to deal with that.
The Hatch Incubator also comes with an extended group of 80 mentors that includes industry experts, angel investors and entrepreneurs. The Hatch mentors here provide the necessary guidance and deep engaged assistance.
A lot of these teams that we have incubated are people with great ideas. They have a tremendous passion about the ideas that they want to do. What we help them do is construct a good business around that. We help them with their operating plans, we help them with the business models, and we literally help them in many ways of finding out how to target their markets and get the operating plan really going out.
Over the last year or so, the number of incubators in the country has certainly shot up a great deal. But what really stands out about the Hatch Incubator is how they've also included a set of mentors outside of the incubator to help guide startups. Clearly, it's hatching new startups and business ideas that gives Puneet and his team the maximum joy.
With that, we wrap it up here on the show this week. But you know, we'd love to hear from you. Write into us on startingup@etnow.tv. Send us an SMS or simply find us on Facebook. We'll say goodbye, but before we go, as we say every week, remember there's never a better time than now to go out there and start up.